On the Texas frontier, a single act of kindness could get you killed. For Elizabeth Harmon, a widow with nothing left but a failing ranch and a 12-year-old daughter, that kindness was about to arrive on a wave of dust and blood. And it would cost her everything she thought she knew. The year was 1867. 3 years since the war took her husband, Thomas. 3 years of dust, drought, and the slow creep of despair. Her homestead, 15 miles outside Fort Worth, was more a patch of baked earth than a ranch. The sun was a merciless hammer in the sky. "Sarah Jane," Elizabeth called, her voice thin against the vast emptiness. "Beans won't pick themselves." Her daughter, a flash of auburn hair and fierce spirit, looked up from a corn-husk doll. "Coming, Mama." Inside their small cabin, the air was thick with heat and the smell of worry. The drought was a snake, slowly squeezing the life from their crops, their cattle, their hope. A letter from the bank sat hidden beneath Elizabeth's mattress, a paper ghost promising foreclosure. Faith was running as low as the water in their well. As twilight bled across the plains, a new sound cut through the evening quiet. Hoofbeats. Fast. Visitors were rare. Good news was rarer. "Sarah Jane, your room, now." Elizabeth didn't wait for an answer. She reached for the rifle Thomas had left her. It felt cold and heavy in her hands, a poor substitute for the man who once held it. Through the window, she saw them. 3 riders in the blue uniforms of the U.S. Cavalry. A flicker of relief. Then it died. Their faces were grim, carved from stone and bad news. The lead officer, a captain, dismounted. He moved with a weariness that went bone deep. "Mrs. Harmon, I'm Captain James Miller, 7th Cavalry." Elizabeth stepped onto the porch. The rifle stayed in her hands. "What brings the army to my doorstep, Captain?" His eyes were flat, tired. "Comanche raid. 10 miles west. The Henderson place." His voice dropped. "They didn't make it." A cold fist clenched in Elizabeth's stomach. The Hendersons had 4 children. 4 small, laughing children. "We tracked the war party," the captain continued, "but they vanished near Sweetwater Creek. This is Chief Greywolf's band. They're thorough." Elizabeth knew what that meant. Stories whispered in Fort Worth. Scalps. Burned-out homesteads. "I'm posting a patrol in this area," Miller said, "but I'd advise you to leave. Go to Fort Worth until we have this contained." Elizabeth's spine stiffened. "This is my home, Captain. My husband died so we could have it. Abandoning it now felt like a second betrayal. Besides, the bank would be waiting." Captain Miller looked at her, a flicker of something, pity, maybe respect, in his eyes. "Your courage is admirable, ma'am, but Greywolf is not a man to be trifled with." After the soldiers left, promising to check in, Elizabeth bolted the door. Sarah Jane crept out of her room, her face a pale moon in the dim light. "Is it true, Mama? The Hendersons?" Elizabeth pulled her daughter close, the scent of dust and sunshine in her hair. "Yes. Which is why you stay close. You see anyone, you run to me. You understand?" That night, sleep was a distant country. Elizabeth sat by the window, rifle across her lap, watching the moonlight paint the prairie in shades of silver and threat. The world she knew was shrinking, the horizon drawing closer, filled with unseen dangers. She finally drifted off just before dawn, unaware that her world was about to be torn apart. Not by a war party, but by a single, desperate woman. 3 days passed. The air grew thick, heavy with the promise of rain that never came. The cavalry patrol made a wide loop each day, a comforting, distant presence. But the fear remained, a low hum beneath the surface of their chores. They were in the parched vegetable garden when it happened. "Mama, look!" Sarah Jane pointed west. "Clouds!" A dark bruise was spreading on the horizon. Hope, sharp and sudden, pierced Elizabeth's heart. Rain meant life. It meant they could hold on. As she worked, a flash of movement at the edge of the property caught her eye. Just a flicker of color in the tall grass. She froze. Her hand went to the knife at her belt. Sarah Jane, inside. Now. The girl didn't argue. She saw the look on her mother's face. Elizabeth stood like a statue, her eyes scanning the sea of grass. Nothing. Had she imagined it? Then she saw it again, closer this time. Someone was moving through the grass, stumbling. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She backed away toward the cabin, her eyes locked on the spot. A figure emerged. A woman. She was Comanche, her buckskin dress torn and stained dark with blood. Her hair was a matted mess, her face a mask of pain and exhaustion. She was clutching a bundle to her chest. The woman saw Elizabeth and stopped, swaying on her feet. 30 yards of sun-scorched earth separated them. Two worlds colliding in a silent, desperate standoff. "Sarah Jane," Elizabeth called, her voice tight. "Bring my rifle. Stay inside." The cabin door creaked. The rifle was pushed out. Elizabeth snatched it, never taking her eyes off the woman. She raised the barrel, not aiming, a warning. "That's far enough." The Comanche woman took another step, then another. Then her legs gave out, and she collapsed to her knees. With trembling hands, she held out the bundle. It was a baby, wrapped in a woven blanket, a small tuft of black hair visible. The woman gasped a single word, her voice like cracking earth. "Bisabuku." Elizabeth hesitated. The rifle felt impossibly heavy. The woman's eyes weren't filled with hate, only a terrible, pleading desperation. She held the child out with one arm. With the other, she pointed west, toward the storm clouds. Then she dragged a finger across her own throat. The message was brutally clear. She was running from death. Every instinct screamed at Elizabeth to stay back, to protect her own. But she saw the baby, and the mother in her won. She lowered the rifle. "Sarah Jane, water." She knelt in front of the woman. The injuries were worse up close. A deep, ragged gash on her shoulder. Her breathing was shallow. The woman pushed the infant toward Elizabeth again, her eyes begging. "Your baby?" Elizabeth asked, making a cradling motion. The woman shook her head weakly. She tapped her own chest. "Numu," she whispered. "Comanche." Then she pointed at the baby and said something else, a frantic string of words Elizabeth couldn't understand. Sarah Jane appeared with a ladle of water. The woman drank, her throat working convulsively. Then she stiffened. Her eyes shot to the western horizon, wide with sheer terror. With a surge of adrenaline, she scrambled to her feet. She shoved the infant into Elizabeth's arms, her grip surprisingly strong. "Bisabuku," she hissed again, backing away. "Numuatu." She made a sweeping gesture, a clear command. "Take the child. Hide." Before Elizabeth could react, the woman turned and fled. Not west where she'd been looking, but north, plunging back into the tall grass. Elizabeth stood frozen, a stranger's baby wailing in her arms. Her eyes followed the woman's terrified gaze to the west, and she saw it, a cloud of dust, riders, coming hard. "Sarah Jane! Inside!" She ran for the cabin, the baby clutched to her chest. "Bar the windows! Get me goat's milk and clean rags!" Inside, she laid the child on the table. A boy. He seemed healthy, unhurt. As Sarah Jane fumbled with the milk, Elizabeth risked a look through the window slats. The dust cloud was closer. 5 riders. "Who are they, Mama?" Sarah Jane whispered. "Soldiers?" Elizabeth's mouth was a grim, hard line. "No, sweet pea, not soldiers." The riders burst into view. Comanche warriors. War paint streaked their faces. Rifles and lances glinted in the dying light. They circled the homestead once, their leader barking orders. They fanned out, creating a perimeter. Elizabeth clutched the baby, who had quieted, his dark eyes watching her. She reached for her rifle, knowing it was a fool's hope against 5 warriors. A voice called out, sharp and guttural, in broken English. "Woman, come out! We know you inside!" Her mind raced. They were hunting the woman, and the child. Why? What could this tiny baby have done? "Sarah Jane," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Take the baby. Root cellar. Now." She pointed to the hidden trapdoor under the table. "Don't you make a sound. No matter what you hear. If anything happens to me, you wait till dark. Then you run for the Hamilton farm. You take him with you." Sarah Jane's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks, but she nodded. She took the infant, her small arms surprisingly steady. "Be careful, Mama." The trapdoor closed without a sound. Elizabeth took a deep breath. To hide was to die. To face them was to, maybe, die. She chose to face them. She opened the door and stepped onto the porch, rifle held loosely at her side. A statement, not a threat. The leader, a man built like a mountain with 2 eagle feathers in his hair, urged his horse forward. His eyes were like chips of flint. They swept over her, the house, the barn, missing nothing. "Woman," he grunted. "Comanche woman. Where'd she go?" Elizabeth met his gaze. "A woman came. She was hurt. I gave her water." She paused. "She ran north." It was part of the truth. She prayed it was enough. The warrior's eyes narrowed, searching her face for the lie. "She carries something. Small." Ice slid down Elizabeth's spine. She kept her expression a blank mask. She carried nothing but her wounds. The warrior stared at her for a long, silent moment. Then he turned and barked an order in his own tongue. 2 of his men immediately spurred their horses, riding hard to the north. He turned back to Elizabeth, his gaze colder than ever. He pointed a lance at the ground around the house. "We look." It was not a request. Refusing would be an admission of guilt. As the remaining warriors dismounted, Elizabeth sent a silent prayer down into the dark earth beneath the floorboards. "Stay quiet, little one. Please, stay quiet." Thunder rumbled, the promised storm finally gathering its strength. The warriors were methodical, brutal in their search. They overturned the water trough, kicked open the door to the small barn. Elizabeth stood on the porch, a statue of false calm. The leader climbed the steps. He stood too close, his presence overwhelming. The smell of sweat, horse, and violence filled the air. "Inside," he demanded. Elizabeth didn't move. "This is my home. You have no right." His hand drifted to the hilt of a knife at his belt. "Move." The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, Elizabeth stepped aside. She followed them in, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. They tore her home apart. Furniture was overturned. Her feather mattress was slashed open, a snowstorm of white feathers filling the small room. The leader moved toward the kitchen, toward the table, toward the trapdoor. He reached for the edge of the tablecloth. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing whoop echoed from the north. The warriors froze. Another cry, closer this time. The leader spat a rapid-fire command. His men abandoned the search instantly, rushing back outside. From the porch, Elizabeth saw what had saved her. A cavalry patrol. At least 20 soldiers, riding hard, charging directly for the homestead. The warriors scrambled onto their horses. The leader shot one last venomous look at Elizabeth. A look that promised he wasn't finished. Then they were gone. A cloud of dust vanishing over the western rise. Moments later, Captain Miller reined in his horse, his face a thundercloud of concern. "Mrs. Harmon, are you all right? We saw the riders from the ridge." The tension of the last hour broke. Elizabeth sagged against a porch post, her legs suddenly weak. "They were looking for someone," she managed to say. As the captain began to question her, the sky finally broke open. The rain came down in a torrent, washing the dust and the terror from the air. But Elizabeth felt no relief. Her mind was on the woman who ran, the warriors who hunted, and the baby hidden beneath her floor. The most dangerous secret on the Texas frontier. The cavalry made camp near the homestead, a circle of firelight in the pouring rain. Captain Miller posted 2 guards on her porch. Elizabeth was grateful for the illusion of safety. When the camp was quiet, she lifted the trapdoor. Sarah Jane emerged, blinking in the lamplight, the baby asleep in her arms. "What do we do now, Mama?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Elizabeth took the infant, swaddling him in one of Sarah Jane's old blankets. He was so small, so perfect. "We can't tell them, Sweet Pea. Not the soldiers. Not yet." She didn't know why. It was a gut feeling, a cold certainty that this was more complicated than it seemed. The warrior's intensity, his specific question. She carries something small. It wasn't just about a baby. The lady who brought him, Sarah Jane said. Was she his mama? Maybe, Elizabeth said. But the woman's desperation felt different. It was the terror of a courier, not just a mother. We'll call him Joseph, she decided. For now. As the rain drummed on the roof, Elizabeth tried to piece it together. The cavalry would leave. The warriors would come back. And she was in the middle, harboring a secret that could get them all killed. Captain Miller came knocking at dawn. Mrs. Harmon. He looked haggard. My men found something. His expression was dark. 3 miles north. The body of a Comanche woman, killed with a lance. Looks like her own people did it. Elizabeth's hand flew to her mouth. The woman. Whatever she was running from, Miller said grimly, it caught up with her. He studied her face, his eyes sharp. Is there anything else you can tell me? Anything at all? Elizabeth's heart hammered. To tell him was to hand the baby over to an uncertain fate. To lie was to risk everything. She was terrified, Elizabeth said, choosing her words carefully. She kept saying a word. Bisabuku. Miller frowned. Bisabuku? Never heard it. He turned to go, then paused. One more thing. The leader of that war party. We think it was Running Fox. The name meant nothing to Elizabeth. He's Chief Grey Wolf's eldest son, Miller explained, and he is not a man who gives up. After he left, Elizabeth felt the walls of her cabin closing in. The baby, Joseph, watched her with wide, knowing eyes. A knock at the door made them both jump. She quickly threw a shawl over the makeshift cradle. It was Miller again, and with him, an older man with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much. His heritage was a story written on his skin. Mrs. Harmon, this is our scout, John 2 Rivers. Tell him the word you heard. Elizabeth invited them in, her body a shield in front of the cradle. She repeated the word. Bisabuku. 2 Rivers' reaction was immediate, a jolt of shock, quickly masked. Bisapuku, he said, the word sounding right on his tongue. He looked at Miller, then back at Elizabeth. It means, save the child. Then he told them a story of whispers and rumors that traveled on the wind between the tribes. Chief Grey Wolf had a new son, born 3 moons ago. A special child, marked by the spirits with a perfect handprint birthmark on his shoulder. Elizabeth felt a cold dread creep up her spine. She had seen that mark when she changed the baby's wrappings. But Running Fox, 2 Rivers continued, his voice low. The chief's son by another wife claims the child is a curse, a bad omen. He wants the child gone, to secure his own path to becoming chief. So Running Fox is trying to kill his own brother? Miller asked, disgusted. 2 Rivers nodded. The question is, where's that child now? The 3 of them stood in silence. The air was thick with the unspoken question. And then, as if on cue, a tiny, unmistakable cry came from beneath the shawl. The world stopped. Miller's hand went to his pistol. 2 Rivers' eyes widened. Elizabeth stood frozen in a prison of her own making. Mrs. Harmon, Miller said, his voice dangerously quiet. What was that? Before she could speak, 2 Rivers stepped forward and gently pulled back the shawl. The baby blinked in the light and let out another soft cry. 2 Rivers pointed a finger at the infant's exposed shoulder. The mark! His voice was barely a whisper. It's him. Grey Wolf's son. Captain Miller's face hardened into a mask of fury. He turned on Elizabeth. You lied to me. I was protecting him, she shot back, her fear replaced by a surge of defiance. Your scout just said his own brother wants him dead. Those warriors would have killed him. This changes everything, Miller muttered, running a hand through his hair. If Running Fox finds out we have him, he'll bring his entire war party down on our heads. He looked at 2 Rivers. What if we return him, to Grey Wolf? The scout considered it. Grey Wolf is a man of honor. He is not like his son. Gratitude for the return of his heir. It could open a door to peace. A tiny flame of hope flickered in Elizabeth's chest. All right, Miller said, his mind made up. We take the child to Fort Worth. We'll send a messenger to Grey Wolf under a flag of truce." "No," Elizabeth said. Both men stared at her. "No," she repeated, her voice stronger, surprising even herself. "I found him. I protected him. I will be the one to return him." Miller looked at her as if she'd lost her mind. "Mrs. Harmon, that's suicide. Grey Wolf's camp is a 3-day ride through hostile territory." "Then you'll escort me," she said, her chin set. "Mr. Two Rivers will guide us. His father needs to see who saved him. Not a soldier in a blue coat. A settler. A mother." Sarah Jane, who had been silent, suddenly spoke from the doorway. "Mama knows what it's like to lose a child, Captain. She knows what that chief is feeling." Miller looked from Elizabeth to Sarah Jane, then to Two Rivers, who gave a slow, deliberate nod. "You are either the bravest woman I have ever met, Mrs. Harmon," Miller said at last, "or the most foolish." He sighed. "We leave at dawn." That night, the small cabin felt like the calm at the center of a hurricane. Elizabeth sat with the sleeping infant, a child whose real name she didn't even know, a child who carried the weight of a war on his tiny shoulders. This journey was more than just returning a baby. It was a desperate gamble for peace, and she was the one rolling the dice. What she didn't know was that the game was rigged, and one of the men riding with her was about to betray them all. The expedition rode west at sunrise, a small island of blue uniforms in a vast, hostile sea of grass. The baby, whom Two Rivers had called Wani, meaning morning light, was strapped to Elizabeth's chest in a carrier the scout had made. Captain Miller rode beside her, his face a grim mask of vigilance. Two Rivers scouted ahead, a ghost on the horizon. The first day was a quiet agony of tension. Every distant shape, every rustle in the grass, was a potential threat. That night, they camped in a hidden ravine. As Elizabeth fed Wani, Two Rivers sat down beside her. "You have questions," he said. It wasn't a question. "The woman," Elizabeth said. "Tall Willow. Was she his mother?" Two Rivers shook his head. "His mother, Singing Bird, died in childbirth. Tall Willow was another of Grey Wolf's wives. She loved the child as her own. She died to save him." He poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks into the darkness. "Running Fox believes strength is the only language our people have left. Grey Wolf sees the world changing. He believes we must change with it, or be wiped away. Wani, he is the future Grey Wolf wants to build." A future Running Fox would do anything to destroy. The second day, the landscape grew harsher. The prairie gave way to rocky hills and thorny mesquite. Twice, Two Rivers found signs of riders ahead of them, fresh tracks, a still warm campfire. Running Fox was close. He was hunting them. That evening, camped under a limestone cliff, Miller pointed to a distant ridge. "Grey Wolf's camp is just beyond there. We'll approach at dawn with a white flag." Relief washed over Elizabeth, so potent it almost made her dizzy. It was almost over. But as she held Wani that night, a profound sadness settled over her. In just a few days, this tiny child had found a place in her heart. Giving him up would be like tearing a part of herself away. The hours before dawn were the worst. She found herself weeping for her husband, for Tall Willow, for this impossible, violent world, and for the baby who slept peacefully in her arms, unaware of the storm that raged around him. They rode out in the morning mist, a white shirt tied to a rifle serving as their flag of truce. As they crested the final ridge, the Comanche camp came into view. Dozens of teepees, hundreds of horses, a city of smoke and life on the plains. Their arrival sent a shockwave through the camp. Warriors grabbed their weapons. Two Rivers rode ahead, calling out in his own language. His words seemed to hang in the air, charged with power. A tall, imposing figure emerged from the largest teepee. Grey Wolf. His face was a masterpiece of dignity and sorrow, his eyes holding the wisdom of 1,000 seasons. Two Rivers dismounted and spoke to the chief, his voice low and respectful. After a long, tense moment, he returned. "The chief will see us. Only you, the captain, and me. The soldiers wait here." Elizabeth's heart hammered as they walked into the heart of the camp. Hundreds of eyes watched them, hostile and suspicious. They stopped 20 paces from the chief. "Show him the child," Two Rivers whispered. With trembling hands, Elizabeth unwrapped the blanket, revealing Wani's face and the handprint mark on his shoulder. A gasp went through the crowd. Grey Wolf's stoic mask shattered. His eyes locked on his son. He spoke a single broken word. "He asks if the child is well," Two Rivers translated. "He is strong," Elizabeth said, her own voice thick with emotion. "I called him Joseph, but I know his name is Wani." When Two Rivers translated her words, Grey Wolf took a step forward. He spoke at length, his eyes never leaving his son. "He thanks you," Two Rivers said. "He says Tall Willow sent a message through another tribe. She said she gave the child to a white woman with kind eyes. He did not dare to hope it was true." The chief spoke again, his gaze finding Elizabeth's. "He asks why you would do this. Why risk your life for the child of an enemy?" Elizabeth looked straight into the chief's eyes. "Because I am a mother," she said, Two Rivers translating her words into a flowing river of Comanche. "I know the pain of loss. When I saw him, I did not see an enemy. I saw a child, and all children deserve to be saved." Her words seemed to strike a deep chord in the old chief. He approached her, his arms outstretched. The moment was here. With one last look, one last gentle touch of his cheek, Elizabeth placed Wani into his father's arms. Grey Wolf held his son with a reverence that was painful to watch. Wani, impossibly, reached up and grabbed his father's finger. The great chief looked at Elizabeth, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "He says you have given him back his future," Two Rivers translated. "He names you Numunuku, friend of the people." But as the chief turned to present his son to the tribe, a new sound cut through the air, a single, defiant war cry from the edge of the camp. Running Fox. He stood there, flanked by the warriors who had torn apart her home. His face was a mask of rage and disbelief. "You bring our enemies into our camp, old man," he shouted, his voice dripping with contempt. "You accept this child from the hands of those who murder our women?" He pointed a lance at Elizabeth. "She is the one who killed Tall Willow. She stole the child." The mood in the camp shifted instantly. The tentative hope curdled into suspicion and hate. Warriors reached for their weapons. Grey Wolf stood between them, holding his son, his face a storm of conflict. "My son speaks with a forked tongue," Grey Wolf declared, but his voice lacked conviction. The seed of doubt had been planted. Captain Miller drew his pistol. His soldiers, seeing the commotion from the ridge, began to ride down. The camp was a powder keg, and Running Fox had just lit the fuse. "This wasn't part of the plan," Miller hissed to Two Rivers. Two Rivers' face was unreadable. "Plans change," he said. And as Running Fox's warriors began to move forward, surrounding them, Elizabeth realized the horrifying truth. This wasn't a rescue. It was an ambush. And Two Rivers had led them right into it. "What have you done?" Elizabeth whispered, turning to the scout. A cold, dead smile touched Two Rivers' lips. "Running Fox is the future, not this old man and his dreams of peace with the whites who slaughtered my family." The betrayal was a physical blow. They were trapped, surrounded, their guide now their enemy. Running Fox stepped forward, his eyes burning with triumph. "The child is a curse. This woman is a witch. Give them to me, father, or I will take them." Grey Wolf stood his ground, clutching Wani to his chest, his face torn with anguish. He was a chief, but he was also a father. "You are no son of mine," Grey Wolf said, his voice a low growl. That was all Running Fox needed. He let out a piercing shriek, and his warriors surged forward. Miller and his men opened fire. The peaceful camp erupted into a maelstrom of chaos and violence. Gunshots, war cries, screaming women and children. Elizabeth threw herself to the ground, trying to shield her head. A warrior loomed over her, a tomahawk raised. Suddenly he fell, a cavalry pistol smoking in Captain Miller's hand. Miller grabbed her arm, hauling her to her feet. "We have to get to the horses," he yelled over the din. But their horses were gone. Running Fox's men had scattered them. They were cut off. Two Rivers was fighting alongside Running Fox, his face a mask of cold fury as he cut down a young soldier. "There!" Miller pointed. A deep ravine cut through the back of the camp. "It's our only chance!" They ran, dodging warriors and panicked horses. Elizabeth glanced back and saw Grey Wolf, surrounded by a small group of loyal elders, fighting to protect his infant son. They scrambled down the rocky side of the ravine, sliding and scraping their way to the bottom. Bullets and arrows ricocheted off the rocks above them. "What now, Captain?" a terrified young soldier asked, reloading his rifle. Miller looked grim. "We follow this ravine. Pray it leads somewhere they can't follow." But Elizabeth knew better. This was their land. They knew every rock, every hiding place. They were just delaying the inevitable. As they stumbled through the ravine, a thought struck her. A memory. The Comanche woman. Tall Willow. What had she said? Bisabuku. Two Rivers had translated it as, "Save the child." But what if it meant something else? The way she had pushed the baby into her arms, her other hand had clutched at a small leather pouch tied to the baby's blanket. In the chaos, Elizabeth had stuffed it into her pocket without a thought. Her fingers closed around it now. It was small, soft, with something hard inside. "Captain," she said, her voice urgent. "Two Rivers lied, about everything." Before she could explain, a figure appeared on the ridge above them. Running Fox. He raised his rifle, the setting sun glinting off the barrel. He wasn't aiming at Miller or the soldiers. He was aiming at her. Miller shoved her hard. They both tumbled to the ground as a shot rang out, chipping stone where her head had been. "They've got us pinned!" Miller yelled. They were trapped. The ravine was a kill box. Night fell, but it brought no safety. Fires burned on the ridge above them. The silhouettes of warriors moved against the flames. They were surrounded. The small group of survivors huddled together in the darkness, their ammunition low, their hope lower. "What was in the pouch?" Miller asked, his voice a low whisper. Elizabeth pulled it out. The leather was worn, decorated with simple beads. She untied the drawstring and tipped the contents into her palm. It wasn't a map. It wasn't a jewel. It was a tooth. A child's milk tooth, small and white, and a single pressed bluebonnet, impossibly delicate. It made no sense. "This is what this is all about?" the young soldier scoffed. "A baby tooth?" But Elizabeth looked at the items, and a different story began to form in her mind. A story of a mother. Singing bird. This wasn't a political token. This was personal. "Captain," she whispered, an idea taking shape, as desperate and crazy as their situation. "I have to go back." "Have you lost your mind?" he hissed. "Running Fox lied," she explained, her words coming in a rush. "He told Grey Wolf I killed Tall Willow. That's why the chief hesitated. If I can prove he's a liar, his own people might turn on him." "And how do you plan to do that?" She held up the tooth and the flower. "With this." It was suicide, but staying here was also suicide. Under the cover of a moonless sky, Elizabeth began to climb. She left the pouch with Miller. If she didn't make it, at least he would know. Her hands were raw, her lungs burned, but she pulled herself up the side of the ravine, moving from shadow to shadow. She could hear the warriors above speaking in low tones. She reached the top, her heart pounding so hard she was sure they could hear it. The camp was a mess of smoldering fires and overturned teepees. She crept toward the center, toward the chief's lodge. She saw him. Grey Wolf was sitting by a fire, his face etched with a grief so profound it was terrifying. The baby, Wani, was in a cradle board beside him. Several of Running Fox's warriors stood guard nearby. There was no way to get to him. Then she saw someone else, moving in the shadows near the back of the lodge. John Two Rivers. He wasn't standing guard. He was watching the chief, his expression a storm of conflicting emotions. Regret? Doubt? Elizabeth took a breath and stepped out of the shadows. Two Rivers spun around, his knife in his hand. His eyes widened when he saw her. "What are you doing here, you fool?" he whispered harshly. "They will kill you." "You lied," Elizabeth whispered back, her voice shaking but firm. "Bisabuku." It doesn't just mean save the child, does it? He stared at her, his face a mask. It also means tell the story, she guessed, the pieces clicking into place. Tall Willow wasn't just giving me the baby, she was giving me the truth. Two Rivers looked away, toward the broken camp. Running Fox promised us a return to glory, a war to take back what was stolen from us. He promised you a war built on a lie, Elizabeth pressed. He's not a leader, he's a murderer. He wants to kill his own brother. It is the way of the warrior, Two Rivers said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, Elizabeth said. It is the way of a coward. She took another step closer. Help me tell Grey Wolf the truth. For Wani, for the future you said he represented. A shout from across the camp interrupted them. A warrior had spotted her. It was over. Running Fox appeared, a triumphant sneer on his face. The White Witch returns! He strode toward her. I will enjoy killing you myself. He raised his knife. Suddenly, an arrow thudded into the ground at his feet. Everyone turned. Grey Wolf stood before his lodge, a bow in his hand, his face terrible to behold. You will not touch her, the chief commanded, his voice ringing with authority. She is our enemy, Running Fox snarled. She works with the soldiers. She came here under a flag of peace, Grey Wolf said. You dishonored it. You dishonored me. You dishonored our people. He turned his gaze on Two Rivers. And you betrayed my trust. Two Rivers looked from the furious chief to the murderous son. He looked at Elizabeth. He saw the path he had chosen, paved with lies and blood. In that moment, he made a new choice. He lies, my chief, Two Rivers said, his voice clear and strong. Running Fox ordered the death of Tall Willow. He wants the child dead so he alone can rule. Running Fox let out a roar of fury and lunged, not at his father, but at the cradle board, at Wani. If he couldn't rule, he would destroy the future. What happened next was a blur. Two Rivers threw himself in front of the cradle, taking the full force of Running Fox's knife in his chest. Elizabeth screamed. Grey Wolf, with a cry of pure anguish, fired his arrow. It struck his eldest son in the shoulder, staggering him. Running Fox turned on his father, his knife dripping with Two Rivers' blood. The two men, father and son, leader and usurper, circled each other in the firelight. It was a fight to the death. For the soul of the Comanche people. The fight was short and brutal. Grey Wolf was older, but his grief and rage gave him a terrifying strength. He disarmed his son, his movements swift and economical. Running Fox, defeated and bleeding, knelt in the dust. You have broken our laws, Grey Wolf said, his voice heavy with sorrow. You have shed the blood of your own. You are no longer Comanche. He banished him. A fate worse than death. To be cast out, alone, without a tribe. As Running Fox was dragged away, spitting curses, Elizabeth rushed to Two Rivers' side. He was dying. I was wrong, he gasped, his hand pressed to his chest. Peace is the harder path, the warrior's path. He looked at her. Tell them my story. And then he was gone. The camp was silent, save for the crackling of the fire and the soft whimpering of a baby. Grey Wolf walked over to Elizabeth. He looked at the body of the man who had betrayed him and the woman who had saved him. You spoke the truth, he said, when others spoke only of war. He picked up the cradle board. Wani was awake, his dark eyes watching everything. Numu Nuku, Grey Wolf said, his voice filled with a profound respect. Friend of the people. You have paid a high price for that name. He looked toward the ravine where Miller and his men were still hiding. Tell your captain the war is over, at least for today. The journey home was quiet, somber. Captain Miller had recovered the pouch from Elizabeth. When Grey Wolf saw the tooth and the flower, he finally broke down, weeping for his lost wife, Singing Bird. It was a keepsake she had wanted her son to have. A mother's love, reaching across the veil of death. The peace talks that followed were difficult, but they held. Grey Wolf, now the undisputed leader, was a man of his word. The raids stopped. A fragile, tentative peace settled over the land. When Elizabeth and Miller finally rode back to her homestead, They found Sarah Jane waiting, safe at the Hamiltons. Miller handed Elizabeth a letter. "This came while we were gone, from my commander." Elizabeth opened it. It wasn't from the army. It was from the bank. The foreclosure notice had been rescinded. "An anonymous benefactor paid your debt," Miller explained, a small smile on his face. "Seems the U.S. government has a vested interest in keeping its heroes on their land." That night, Elizabeth stood on her porch. Her home was safe. Her daughter was safe. The world felt bigger, more complicated, but also more hopeful than it had before. She looked up at the full moon, a silver dollar in the velvet sky. Somewhere, deep in the heart of the prairie, a chief was holding his son, telling him a story. A story about a woman who saw a child, not an enemy. A story about how a single act of compassion, a single moment of courage, could change the world. And in that shared moonlight, Elizabeth Harmon knew she was not alone. If you were moved by Elizabeth's story of bravery and hope, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think is the true path to peace?